Hi, everyone. Do I sound French? No, we're good. All right. I don't know which one of you guys attended last year. Last year, it was all about time. Let's say how time was critical when we're talking about incident response, about Active Directory, about everything. So today, what I tried to do is bring you a sort of a fun way to see a hitchhiker's guide to securing tier 0. So we're going to go through a few slides. That's my face. All right, I'm a little big on that one. So 18 plus years of experience. I work in France. You probably don't know most of those companies except the two last ones, which are Avanade, so a Microsoft and Accenture joint venture, and Accenture, of course, where I'm working today. So quick intro and 2022 hip flashback. So in this Hitchhiker's Guide, I'd like to try to point out that we have different steps. All right, last year I was talking about planning is key. You don't want to start thinking. You don't want to be creative or anything. You have to have everything ready, and for that you need a plan. So to secure your tier 0 ecosystem, I'd like to give like 4 different steps that I usually run through with my customers. We usually start with assessing the environment. Then once we've assessed the environment, we build a roadmap. Then once the roadmap is defined with a customer, depending on his budget, of course, we go for running the work streams. That means implementation with the customer. And then, of course, the last part, which is really important to me, is also establishing governance. We're going to try to talk today. It's not just about the technical part. It's also about the functional part, because IT is not just the tools that you use, but also the people who use them. And that's what the previous speaker was talking about in the session. So if you look at assess the environment, so we'll assess the environment using script and tools, which is, of course, what everybody does and which everybody should be doing right here. Who's been running Purple Night in their environment right now? All right, we got some hands up. That's good. All right, that's part 1. But the second part is, of course, going through all the different IT teams that are actually putting their hands on the computers and what they're doing with it. So we also go through, of course, a lot of talks with the people and analysis and try to understand what they do. Okay, I'm going to move quickly to the next slide. I showed this last year. It was a life cycle of ransomware attack. So we have different steps right here: the initial access, consolidation, preparation, impact on the target. So we can see a few things that you were speaking about a little earlier on. Destroy the backups, encrypt data. We were talking about lateral movement, privilege escalation, right here, all that type of stuff. So zap command and control, as you said previously. This is an old slide, all right? But most of it is true. And the most important thing is on the initial access, if you check it out, there are many, many, many different things. And this is the key point, is that initial access can be website where you click on something, can be an email, can be anything that's web exposed. It can be so many things, plugging in a USB stick. You have so many things that you actually have to take care of in your environment. And it's so complicated today. And we're using so many tools. I mean, as you previously said, we got EDR, we got SASE, Zero Trust, we got everything. We got everything, all right? But then we'll just go to the next slide. Everything is basically, for me, sorry? Yeah. ZDR, yeah, XDR, ZDR, whatever. No. Oh, zero DR, all right. Okay, but there's so many things out there, and right now, I called it last year, it's like your C-levels are basically checking, they're ticking check boxes. It's like, do you have EDR? Yes, we do. Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Yes, we do, yes, we do, yes, we do. But they're just implementing things, but they're not really testing them out. And from my perspective, what it is, it's sort of like, so this was my little joke right here, building a wall. Okay, not a very good joke right now, but build the wall, all right? So I was saying you can build a wall, but you actually can circumvent a wall. You can walk around the wall, you can crawl over it, right? It's pretty easy. And for me, from my perspective, it's like having a huge, nice house right here made out of glass, and you got a reinforced steel door right in front. That's great, but there are tons of ways to get in your system. So it's not by implementing tons of stuff that your system is actually going to be safe, all right? That's what I was trying to say. And there's another meme that's really interesting. It's if you have a dam with water and you have cracks on your dam and things going through, and basically the IT guys they're putting EDR, to stop a gap. And then they're putting, a Zero Trust on another one. And it's pretty much that. We're always running to protect things, but that might not be the best solution. So now, for people who know me, I like memes also. So I like movies and I like rap. So does anybody know which movie this comes from? Marathon Man. Who said that? All right. And do you remember what he said when they're drilling the teeth out of Dustin Hoffman? No, I'm trying to. You're trying to remember? Is it safe? That was the question: is it safe? And they're drilling his teeth and saying, yes, it's safe. They're drilling him again. No, it's not safe. Yes, it's safe. So basically, the real question is, with all these tools, is your environment safe? Okay. So this one is actually funny. I don't know the crowd here, so I don't know if you guys are IT guys or if you're C-level guys. I usually speak with the C-level guys, and everybody's like, yeah, Active Directory, I heard about it, don't really understand what it is. So Active Directory, what I'm trying to point out on this one, so I've been working for 18 years. I've been hearing for maybe the past 12 or 15 years that AD was supposed to disappear. It's still here for some reason, and I think it's probably going to be here for quite some years to come, and I hope so, because it's my passion. So Active Directory, if we're looking at AD right here, and we're talking about identity, everybody knows here that when a user connects to a device, basically he's using AD. That's pretty simple. But what people, well, not the IT people, but what C-levels tend to forget is everything that goes behind. What happens when the identity actually connects to an on-prem resource, file and print server, application server? You're basically leveraging AD groups, so you need Active Directory for that. What happens when you're hitting the network? So as we were saying, web, firewall, VPN, proxy, all those type of things, or 802.1x or that type of stuff, you know, radius servers. Basically, you're once again leveraging Active Directory in the background. What happens? Same thing with your cloud resources, because everybody's telling me, oh, it's fine, we're in a hybrid environment, everything's in the cloud, so everything's safe. All right, that's great. Office 365, most of the rollouts I've performed, they use AD Connect. AD Connect is actually syncing all your on-prem identities to the cloud. So what happens when you get hit on-prem? What happens to the cloud? Are you still going to access your email that easy? What happens for all of your SaaS applications? Oh, that's perfectly fine. They're in the cloud, so we're not handling them. Great. But what are they federated to? What happens if AD goes down? Are you still going to be able to access all your SaaS applications? I'm pretty sure that's not the case. So now the question is, what would happen if AD was unavailable, crypto-locked, let's say, or down? For your offices, your stores, I don't know what your business is, manufacturing, distribution, and whatever. Do you really think that anything would really be working when AD is down? I guess not.
I can answer that one.
All right.
Definitively no.
All right, no. All right. So start with the assessment. I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to go straight to the other one. This is what we usually do, okay, when we do an assessment. So we run several tools. The first one is we will run, of course, Purple Night. That's to get, of course, that's something that all of you should do. All right, that's number one, run Purple Night. And we also run an in-house tool that looks at a lot of other stuff that Purple Night doesn't do. Purple Night is more about IOEs, IOCs. Our tool is more about day-to-day operations. Let's say it's more of an ops control to see the number of objects that you have, the number of old objects, last password, all the type of stuff that basically an administrator should be doing. Well, we're doing that on top. And what we do is then we analyze those outputs to get an idea. Then we start running interviews, and that's the second most important part, because as I said, tools are one, but your IT is another one. If your IT guy connects from his standard computer, I don't know why he's using his elevated credentials on his computer to log in or stuff like that, that's basically stuff that you want to avoid. So you really want to understand how they connect. But it's not just, of course, the AD guys. You also need to understand your network guys, how they log on is, I don't know, when they connect to the firewalls, it integrated with AD, do they connect with their AD accounts, do they connect with local accounts, how does all that work? So we usually go for a lot of interviews. We go interviews with Tier 0 team, of course. We go with the T1 team, Tier 1 team, Tier 2 teams. We go with the network teams. We go with the backup teams. It's a lot of interviewing, okay? And once that process is done, basically we crunch it all down. And at the end, at the final day, what we do is we try to define with the customer what are the work streams we need to work on. Because right now, everybody's heard about it. Everybody knows you're supposed to protect Tier 0. That's good. But how do you actually protect Tier 0? What are the streams that are the most important? Which are the quick wins? What's the stuff that you keep and you do at the end? That's the real question. Have you guys, are all of you guys, I mean, currently on a 85 plus score on Purple Night in your environment? All right, nobody's up, 70 plus? No, I'm kidding. But I mean, is everybody bringing their Purple Night score up? Yeah, okay, I guess. All right, that Purple Night is like the basic thing to start with, but it's way more than that, all right? So now, at the end of the day, I'll give you an example. We were doing this audit for a company. So 80,000 users, 3 different forests, site across the world. Let's say Purple Night score, it was below 60%. So the quick question is, how much do you think? So when we started doing the prioritization of the different work streams with a customer, trying to define what we were going to implement and how we were going to implement it, how long do you think this actually takes to bring a score from 58% to 85% in this type of a company? Does anybody have an idea? A number of man days, ballpark.
6 months. I was going to say 6 months.
All right, 6 months, I'll hire you. But someone said 2 years. All right. So in a big company like this, 80,000 users, 3/4 span worldwide, multiple IT different teams, it usually is more than that. So the truth hurts. What we did is we estimated it for 1,200 plus man days on our side and more than 400 man days on the company's side. So that brings us, if you put it in a timeline, that would be closer to 2 years. Yeah, you can do it in 6 months if you have like multiple people. But the thing is, it's all about the slide that you were showing, helping the CISO out and helping business out. There's so many things that we're going to have to do. When we're working on the service accounts, when we're working on deprecated protocols, when we're working on all that, it takes 2 seconds to change a NTLM, a disconnected. It takes me 2 seconds to do it. So for sure, I could say 10 minutes. The truth is, you do that, you're probably going to screw 20% of your applications and things are not going to work anymore. So it takes a little more time. So at this part of time, when you start in and you tell your CISO your security level is crap and it's going to take us probably 1.5 years to get you, on a decent level, and meanwhile, you're pretty exposed. So what's their choice now? So because we're in New York and I listen to rap, I like Nas a lot. So the first one is take Nas as an example. So you tell the CISO, well, you don't sleep because sleep is, the cousin of death. So every night he can stay awake, and that could be one. Or the other one, I think it's actually time to build a plan. So when you build a plan, usually who do you call? You call the A team. Okay. And why do you call the A team? Because Hannibal always says, I love it when a plan comes together. It's all about the planning is what I'm trying to say right here. We're talking about a massive time scale, a lot of teams. It's going to be the business teams, it's going to be the technical teams, people throughout the world that are going to be working together to try to make this work, okay? And it's actually going to cost you a lot of money, which is also the issue. So, are we sitting ducks? This is my first step. So, you've just realized that you have 1,600 man days that will be required to get to an acceptable level of security on Active Directory, which is pretty long. So the first question is, what are we going to do during that time frame? Are we just going to sit around and do nothing? Would be my first question. No. So the first thing is to get, Active Directory, a backup and restore, program, or think about how to implement it and do it correctly, all right? You have to keep in mind, of course, that if you've never performed true DR, and the previous guy asked you guys, you restored a single DC, you restored multiple DCs, let's go in a full-blown event where you're fully crypto locked. So it's not one DC, it's all of your DCs that are down. It's not one server, it's most of the servers that are down. Maybe your hypervisors are also down. Everything's down. So how do you bring that back up right now? Is it just that easy to spin off a backup and just take it and it's going to work out fine? But if AD is down, is your DNS integrated to AD? How are you going to connect to your hypervisors? How are you working around in your environment, even getting your backups? We were talking about the immutable storage. What if that's shot? So the real question is, you've never done a true DR exercise if you've not done it from scratch. So I would truly push for all of you guys to try to do not restoring just one DC, but we're restoring everything and from scratch. That's the only way that you'll really know how painful it is and how long it can take. I'm very serious about this, all right? Some companies actually never come back from this because they've been ransomware, they think they have a backup doesn't work, or the tape they restored it to doesn't work or whatever. And that it's actually true, it's sad, but many companies closed, all right? Some others, they actually take weeks to operate again, okay? Have you ever evaluated how much you're losing, how much money you're losing when you're not running, when your business is not running because AD is down, all right? I did this for one of the insurance companies I work with. They lose 70 mil per day, okay? So if we're talking weeks before you can come back, 70 mil per day actually makes it that, well, I hope you have a lot of cash, stored somewhere because that's going to be very, very expensive, all right? So my question is now is what would Maverick say? Because people who know me know I'm a very, very big fan of Tom Cruise. All right. He says, you know, don't think, just do. So this is the most important step is don't even think about this. You got a year before you're sort of secure. First thing, go back up your Active Directory. Do it with the right tools. Make sure your DR exercises are working, because if you get pawned, at least you'll be able to come back in a timely manner. All right. I believe everybody knows what this tool is, so just quickly on it. Why? Because I'm a lazy person, I'm an IT guy, okay? When we use tools, we just want tools to be simple and we want them to work right. If I'm using a standard tool that most people use, let's just say for backup and restore, just like backupping and restoring a server, I might be backing up malware, I might be backing up tons of stuff, maybe it doesn't do P2V, V2P, whatever, which means that it's a total nightmare. Nothing's running right now and I have to figure out how to restore my system. But before I can even restore my system, I actually have to restore the hypervisors. But before I do that, do I actually have machines? Do I have to keep them for the insurance part because we have forensics going? What am I supposed to do in which order? I don't want to have to think about that. All I want to do is actually say, all right, I got backups, I want to restore them. I can spin off different VMs, or I can put them in the cloud, I can do something else elsewhere, and I want to be able to do that. To do that, you have only, I would say, one tool that does it correctly. Tools are right here. I'm not doing any, publicity stunt for anyone, but I'm just saying this is a very impressive tool that I've been using for many of my customers. Works really well. All right, so the tools are the first step, right? As we said, we were able to bring back AD in less than half a day, or in most cases, let's say 2 hours. That's a good thing, right? But you're able to rebuild your AD environment on your hypervisors, or is it on separate machines? Is it the same IP address, same names, whatever? Now, the real question comes in after that, because we said AD is the basics, right? How do your applications actually work? The service accounts. How do the applications query AD? I've been working with so many companies that actually have applications that will query a specific domain controller or a specific IP address. It's hard-coded inside. Great. We just restored Active Directory. We have different IPs. Business is still not running because your actual applications are not running. Now, the question is also, are your applications still working? And if you didn't evict the intruder, who's to say that he's not going to break you again? So this brings us back to, should we restore the environment, in their open environment, keep everything open and hope that everything works? Probably not. So Pirelli, that was pretty old. Power is nothing without control. So this is something that we actually did for a customer. This is their on-premise production environment. And what we did is we created separate tier 0 bubbles. So what we defined is we would have bubbles. So it's a little publicity stunt for Azure, I guess, but it could be anywhere. So what we did is we had empty bubbles that were already in the cloud with all the network flows that were open, because we defined all the interactions between tier 0 and tier 1. And what we did is we made sure that we were able to restore anything in the cloud in a closed environment, that all the applications that were business critical are restored in their own bubbles by the application people. So the teams are working separately. The tier 0 team is working on the tier 0 part. Tier 1 teams are restoring in their own bubbles. And in the end, all the flows were already open, because we know how horrible that is to make applications work when your network flows are not open. So this is something that we did, and that actually works really well. So I would say AD is step 1. Second part is identifying all your business critical applications, understanding how they work. How do they query AD? And if they're running on Windows Server, do they actually have a DRP scenario also for those applications? Because that is your business. And at the end, are you going to rebuild this in a closed environment and still be able to maintain production? Those are the real questions you have to ask. AD is the basic, but it won't run your business unless everything is thought through thoroughly. So just saying tools are important, but the rest is also. Next steps. Do we have any questions? No. All right. So in the next steps, if you remember in my Hitchhiker's guide, I say that we have build a roadmap. So we need to build a story, prioritize the different work streams, okay? So what I would do is I would start pretty simple. I'm just checking the time right here. Start pretty simple, all right? The basic 3-tier delegation model, that is something, so right here, did everybody implement already the 3-tier delegation model? Tier 0, Tier 1, Tier 2. All of you did? Not really. Some of you did. All right, the truth is, so I work in France and I work with companies from Cauwel, so it's like Fortune 500 companies. I would say that a lot of them, and trust me when I say this, a lot of them still have not finished their tiering model. We're not even talking about the enterprise access model. We're really talking about the basics, the 3-tier, all right? So I would start with the basics. 3 tiers, that's pretty easy. Create separate accounts for, well, tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, and ensure that, of course, your tier 0 accounts can't go elsewhere, and tier 1 and tier 2 accounts can't go, backing up. That's pretty simple. We were also talking about, IOEs and IOCs. So you ran Purple Night, you have tons of fixes, you have tons of stuff to do, you identify the quick wins. Some of them, just a few clicks, all right? That will get your security score up and that will actually help you. Some others might be a little longer, as we were saying, authentication mechanisms, deprecated protocols, all that, that's actually gonna take some time. Patch management, you were talking about it earlier. Patch management, I mean, how many years have we been hounding everyone for patch management? Patch management is like basic. So it's not just for your Windows servers, as we were saying, it's for your servers, but it's also for your firewalls. It's also for your VPN gateways. It's for everything that you have. So this is something that's really important. I mean, you guys see this on the news every day. You get the 0 days, you get everything. Most of the stuff, if it's not, patched, it's probably going to get hit. And even when it's patched, it still can get hit. But at least try to reduce, the exposure as much as you can. Laps or equivalent. So does everybody roll out laps, or are you still in 2008 and you have like the same account with the same password that works on all the machines? Did everybody roll out laps?
We pretended like we did.
All right, you pretended like you did. But I mean, a lapse or equivalent, and I know it's a pain in the butt because everybody says, yeah, but that means that every time I have to go remotely or I come on a computer, then that means I have to go in Active Directory, I have to check for the password, I have to type in it. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt, fine. But at least it will avoid lateral movement. And that's what we were talking about right just before is once they get in, once they get your credentials that are working, they're going to mess around with your machine and they're going to try to move from machine to machine until they get the right creds and they're able to do privilege escalation. So if you don't allow them to do that through laps or similar, then definitely you're reducing the scope and potential attack that you're going to have. Implement MFA whenever possible. So I can remember I had a big fight with Pam Dingle from Microsoft on this one. That was like 3 years ago when she said, MFA is not a question. You should implement MFA anytime. I'm like, yeah, of course we should. But the truth is that most companies don't. And also the companies that do will also use conditional access, meaning if you're on-prem, you're safe, so you don't need to use MFA. And that really got her triggered. But that's the truth, as we were saying right before. You want to make things simple for you guys. They're coming, they're at the office, they don't want to have to go on their phone or whatever. Because they're on-prem, they're safe. That's not true. All right? MFA is mandatory. As you were saying before, if you don't have MFA, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look for people in a high privilege group, and you're going to look for those who don't have MFA enabled, and those are the accounts that you're going to try to pawn, right? So the question is now, why are you not implementing MFA? I mean, all of you have MFA probably from tons of different vendors, very easy to implement, go for it. And then once again, when you're doing MFA, you have to keep in mind, no SMS, no calls, it's supposed to be an application, and if you're doing it better, you're supposed to use the FIDO keys. Because I don't know if you saw the new attacks on MFA, well, new attacks, they've been running for 2 years now on MFA, when they get your cookie sessions and stuff like that, and they re-inject them, and then, yeah, nope, does that ring a bell for anybody? I think it's AITM or something like that, I can't remember, it's attacker in the middle, or I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, it's something that's been happening, and actually Microsoft warned about this last year. I think there was a whole campaign on, I can't remember how many customers where that attack was actually used. So if you're using MFA, I mean, it's still not 100%, but let's just say that it should be a pretty good thing. Then afterwards is PAWs. Do everybody know what a PAW is? A Privileged Access Workstation here. So I get nods from only one person in front, but how are you guys actually performing Active Directory administration? Can I get a few examples out here? How do your teams work? Do they use their standard computer? On their standard computer, do they run elevated privilege, like a command, and then they have all the tools on that computer? Do they go to Jumpbox? Do they connect directly to a DC? Do they fiddle with the DCs? How does it work in your environments? So this is the usual question that I get. So I'll come back on the PAWs right after. The PAW machine is considered like a tier 0 machine. It is tier 0. So it's the same teams that handle your tier 0 environment that should be handling the PAWs, not some tier 1s admins.
I know all about PAWs.
All right, sorry.
I don't know if that's
All right, if that was the case here. All right, I was saying for the PAWs, it's actually something that I actually push everyone to implement.
what's it
All right, cool. So the PAWs, all right. Then, of course, niche AD monitoring tools, right? Previously, we were talking about the logs, right? Do you really think that the logs are not going to be tampered with? Do you think the logs are actually still going to be there? Is like your $1 million SIEM the right solution to go through and try to fix things or understand how the attack happened? No, the logs are not there anymore. Or even if they were there, you're going to take hours and hours to understand what's been happening. So we're talking about niche AD tools. I'll be talking about it right afterwards, all right? Service accounts. So I'm very happy that you were talking about service accounts because that's a battle I've been having for a couple of years and nobody wants to understand. Service accounts. So the companies I work for, they have thousands of service accounts. These accounts have been there since 2000. Most of them, last password changed, never. And the thing is, nobody wants to change the password on them because they're business critical. We don't know how many applications are actually using that service account because nobody does a one-to-one, all right? We're talking about something 20 years ago. So we change that service account password, nothing's gonna work. So we don't change it. That's the rule, all right? And that's so wrong. And once again, those service accounts, what are the privileges that are actually granted to those service accounts? How many times did I see service accounts with DA privileges just because we were too lazy to try to figure out what the application really needed, never doing least privilege or anything? That's like the worst thing you can do. And then the last thing is governance, all right? So I was saying start simple. And then you push harder. All right, so pushing harder was the joke. If you guys like Charlie's Angels, I like the first one in 2000 when Lucy Liu's actually jumping around. He's saying push harder, push harder. So I say you can also go full throttle is what I was trying to say here. So then you can implement PAM. You can implement the enterprise access model, which is way more complex than the 3-tier delegation model, okay? And then you can also finish with SASE zero trust and stuff like that because, of course, network segregation is something that actually really works well, okay? They call them service accounts, but I would call them technical accounts. They're accounts used for applications, but that doesn't really mean that they've hardened them. So that's like the real basics. So if we're talking about tiering, so everybody said you've implemented tiering is what I've heard everywhere, which is great, and I'm happy for you guys because that's not the case in France. Second step, we were talking about securing the connection chain, all right? The chain of connection for me is the second most important part. So we've done segregation on Active Directory. We know which accounts are supposed to perform what. That's great. Now we want to make sure that the people using these accounts are actually doing them from clean machines, right? If you're on your standard machine that you use every day, that has access to the internet, that has access to your email, where you put in your USB stick, where your kids play along, they go on their different websites, the thing is 95% of chance that your machine's been pawned, all right? And then you're going to use that machine to perform privileged operations on your crown jewels of your IT infrastructure, which makes absolutely no sense. So right now, I've sort of given up on tier 2. I consider that tier 2 is pawned no matter what, or it will be, no matter what tools you put on it. So if you want to actually handle tier 0 operations, you have to do them with clean machines. So you have to build PAWs for your teams. It's very simple. No access to the internet, hardened machined, FIDO keys to connect, on them, whatever, and ensuring that the person who's connecting to those machines is actually the person who he says he is, the right person, right? The right operator. Making sure that those machines are clean is the only way to know that if the machine is clean, if we're guaranteeing the operator and only those machines can actually make changes to Active Directory, then you're really highly reducing any risk on Active Directory. Does anybody disagree with this? Niche AD monitoring. So as I said, monitoring is good. A SIEM won't cut it on Active Directory. Just we said, standard backup solution, it's not going to cut it. It won't bring your AD back, or it might bring your AD back, but in a long time and probably with crap on it. So good backup tool, important. Good monitoring tool, very important, because do we want to spend time? Who implemented SCUM here quite, in the time, MOM or SCUM? All right, so we have people. How many red lines did we have in MOM or SCUM? Millions. It's like you're looking at the thing, there are millions of lines on there. And if I have one guy, because the truth is in my SOC team, I have 1, 2, 3 people for a company. They don't want to pay for people. So 3 people having to go through 10,000 red lines in a day. Does that even make sense? Am I supposed to catch anything? No. And as we were saying earlier, it takes a couple of hours to get the crown jewels and then to pawn everything. So if you have to go through 10,000 lines in a single day, that's not going to work, all right? You have to have smart tools that allow you to be lazy, because I like being lazy. Yeah, it's true. I mean, tools that work right, all right? They're not 50 different tools. So what I like in the tools, I like them to have what I call auto heal. So if basically you define, specific, let's take an example, all right? I have to add people to my EA or DA group, okay? Technically, can anybody do that in the company? Should anybody be able to do that? Or should it be programmed for a specific service account between, I don't know, every day at lunchtime, between this time and that time? That maybe should be the only account able to do that. And what if this program was capable to see that, oh, somebody else actually granted the privileges, but it's not the service account, and it's not on the right time? Does that have to go back to your SOC team? Does somebody have to see that and then perform the modifications? Or wouldn't it be easier if the tool could actually do that? So the thing is, get the tool that does it right. There is a tool that does it, and the auto heal is really something that I like because it saves you time, all right? Same thing, we have a lot of detection tools where you have to go through the console and you look at what's happening. And then once you see that something's in progress, you actually have to go on the internet to try to understand what it's about, and then you have to open a console and then try to do something. That's way too long. You're just wasting time. The best thing to do is, if you see that something weird is happening and it's not in your auto heal because you didn't program it, then you should be able, with that simple, let's say, view of your console, to roll back the operations, okay? There are not 50 different tools that do this, and actually the one we're talking about, so still no publicity, but it actually does it, and it works well. Service accounts, we were talking about it. So this is a company, it's an Israeli company that I met in France, and I rolled out their software for one of my customers, and they have a great feature. It's on service accounts, and I've been fighting for service accounts for years, okay? Remember, we said you have thousands of service accounts. The question now is, so does everybody have a mapping here of your service accounts, your application owners, the servers where things are running, and actually how things interact? Does anybody have a real map of that? All right, now that's the truth. Nobody said yes. Nobody knows. So when something goes wrong, or I have to update an application, or I have to make a change to AD and it's going to impact an application, usually it's like, oh, just look for someone, or I think it was that person. Nobody knows, okay? So it takes a really, really long time to fix service accounts. And there are applications out there that do that, and I think that the Simperis app, if I'm getting this right, so I think in DSP they're getting a feature on service accounts in the near future. They're interesting because they can actually map which service account, yep, 5 minutes? I'm close to be done. So they actually can map the service account, the source and the destination, type of authentication, and that's key. And this software actually goes a little further than that. It can add a little routine, so it's going to use some sort of a, let's say, I hate to say it, but it's AI, where they say that it tries to understand, which are the different sources and targets that it usually uses. It will do pattern recognition, and then you can define that anything that's outside of that pattern is actually going to be disabled. So if you're using a service account that's a user account, actually. But we define in this application that it's only used between this server, this source server, this target server. Anytime that account will be triggered to open a session or do something from a different source, well, this application will actually block it, okay? So this is actually very cool software. Governance, all right, so quickly, governance. Get your teams to work as one team, all right? Break those silos. As I said, you don't have time to think up there if you think you're dead, all right? I use that one very often, but it's true. So governance, we have to understand really who interacts with whom, which procedures to follow, and to follow them clearly. If you do that very simply, technically you shouldn't be breaching Active Directory by your process. If you're sticking to protocol, everything should be working out fine. It's very simple. You're allowed to do this, not that. Stick to what you're allowed to do. Very simple. All right, and the other thing is AD as a service. So this is something that I've been pushing for quite a few companies now. So saying that you have IT personnel, they're all over the world, they don't work on the same time zones, whatever, they don't have the same skill level. Is that really the people you want to give Active Directory control to? I don't know, maybe, maybe not. What we're doing right now is we're rolling out teams, so we do this for our customers, people who exclusively work on Active Directory, and they will handle all tier 0 operations for you, which makes it then easier to roll out the PAWs because everybody's in 2 different locations, and it's pretty easy to handle. So I would say next step in the governance is maybe thinking, to run my business, I have to think about projects, I have to think about tons of things, maybe not run. give that to a contractor, have tough SLAs on the contractor, have strong penalties on the contractor if he breaches them. That's stuff that works. Final target. All right, so I got a few minutes left, as Gil said. So we can't really see the picture right here, but once again, it's my good old buddy, Tom. All right. So does anybody remember what they build in Mission Impossible 5 Rogue Nation? No. All right. They build a skiff. Do you remember it's in Morocco when he has to jump into this secure room that's underneath the water and that doesn't have external access and stuff? All right. I actually built something like that for a customer. I didn't have to jump in the water or anything, but we're trying to build the same thing. What we're trying to say is full segregation. So we were talking about tier 0. We did logical segregation, but we actually went to physical segregation. So dedicated hardware, dedicated machines, dedicated environments. So it's completely separate hardware for tier 0, completely separate hardware for PAWs, ensuring that all the access from the PAWs to tier 0 is done on separate VPN gateways. So basically, when everything is shut and killed, you still have access to your tier 0 environment. So if somebody comes in the data center, steals data, steals whatever, all right, data is encrypted at rest, data is encrypted with BitLocker, so there's not much that's going to happen. What happens if you walk on, you connect to the network, and you try to get stuff? All right, we got network segregation and filtering, so you're not going to go anywhere. You're not using PAWs, so you can't connect to the DCs. You can't push any admin commands, or you can't do anything, push anything to the DCs without being trapped. Doesn't work. All right, and the same thing to log on to the PAWs. We have smart card authentication, so we're trying to make it really hard for anybody to come in and be able to have, let's say, high privileged access. And last thing, of course, is gaining access to tier 1 infrastructure is not going to get you access to tier 0. So we were talking about segregation was really important, logical, but physical. As we said, fully isolated tier 0 environment. We're not using the same hypervisors. We have dedicated ESX for this customer for tier 0. So this is something that most of you guys probably do. How many are using hypervisors here? Hyper-V, VMware. All right. How many of you have tier 1 and tier 0 servers on those same hypervisors? Just one of you? 2 of you? All the rest, you have separate ESX servers or Hyper-V servers for your tier 0 environment? I don't believe that. You do. All right. And you're trying to. All right. The thing is, most people actually have tier 0 and tier 1 on tier 1 infrastructure operated by tier 1 personnel. Yeah, all right, people are nodding, yeah. All right, so basically you're getting tier 0 privileges to tier 1 people is what you're doing. Right, which you shouldn't be doing, but okay. So work on that part is maybe to physically separate, segregate also your tier 0 environment if you can. Dedicated service such as PKI, ADFS, AD Connect, all that is tier 0, same thing. Should not be hanging on a tier 1 server, nobody should have access to it except the tier 0 personnel. And last thing, dedicated ecosystem. So this is what you were talking about earlier. What happens to my PAWs? Who manages the PAWs? No one from tier 1 or tier 2. Tier 0 teams only. Tier 0 teams will handle the PAWs, will handle anything in tier 0, and they have to have knowledge on a lot of stuff. So this was from a customer. There was VMware, Veeam, OneView, Tanium, Sentinel-1, Splunk, SolarWinds, tons and tons of stuff, which makes it really complicated. But if you want all that in a single team, if you get an as-a-service team, as we were saying before, you can get that personnel trained, and that one team can be like self-sufficient.